Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at Dshift. Of course, Dshift has gone through some changes with the introduction of Chimera, and I know there are a few different kinds of lists floating around, but this is the one that I found myself being comfortable with personally. So I'm running a single Loki, mainly just for that combo that goes with Chimera, which you will see. And of course, you know, triple Chimera, triple Dshift, pretty standard at this point. Everything else is pretty normal. We've got 3 magic owls, which is a nice addition. We've got the magic rings, which, you know, those mystic rings are a little awkward to use, but when you do use them, they tend to get you that little bit of advantage. Especially in the later game, if you have those rings, you have 2 of them, playing them off each other works out quite nicely. So other than that, you know, you've got plenty of draw power. Pretty much every card draws you a card or spell boosts in some way. You're not running hardly any followers outside of Time Worn Mage, which gives you the Crimson Sorcery card, so that's another spell boost, or Merlin, which is also spell boost. So the only card in this entire deck that does not spell boost, well, I suppose 2 cards, Loki, and Giant Chimera itself doesn't actually spell boost anything. Everything else is designed to boost everything else. So other than that, hopefully you guys enjoy it, and we'll get right into some games. So our first match is a fellow Dshift player. At least that's what it seemed like while I was fighting them.
Let's see you in action.
Looking at it though, you mainly want to go for anything decent in your early game. I mean, this hand was okay, which is why I kept it. The Merlin was okay. But honestly, you want to try and get Chimera or Dshift in your opener, along with something really low to spell boost, either whether it's a 2-drop or a 1-drop. Otherwise, it makes these kind of matchups really difficult, I've found, and the consistency of drawing into Chimera and stuff just isn't there. That's why, fortunately, keeping Merlin can be okay, because you can draw into either Chimera or Dshift, but there's also a few other cards you can draw off it, which aren't quite as good. Luckily for me, though, I did get quite a nice hand, getting the double draw with Insight and with Magic Missile. And, of course, Mystic Ring. Which, finding something to use Mystic Ring on, still a little bit troublesome. Most cards you want to keep, so it's hard to say, hey, I should definitely Mystic Ring this. Obviously, going up against another Dshift, Mystic Ring probably would have been best on the Wind Blast, but I didn't really need it at this point, because I could easily use Magic Owl here, just to spell boost my entire hand. When you have double Chimera, you're not in too much trouble. Especially since I know they're a Dshift as well, so it's basically a race on who can Dshift faster. Luckily for me, they used their Wind Blast. And now that we have double Mystic Rings, we can pretty much just play them on themselves. So I don't really lose anything big. And because Mystic Ring goes back into the deck, if I need it later, it's not too hard to draw it back out. And I do just play the Merlin, because I can't really think of anything else to play here. I would have played the Evolve, but I would really would have wanted something to target, preferably. Of course, their Chimera. Just a little Chimera, not a big Chimera.
This is your fate.
Not too threatening, honestly. And my Merlin pretty much gets to have the decent trades.
It won't be long now.
I mean, getting the Merlin trades is awesome.
A revelation.
Ramming it straight into their Chimera and then easily using the rest of our cards in the following few turns. The only problem now is that Dshift is at like 17, and that's going to be very difficult to come back from. I also had a full hand, so playing the Mage was my better option. Unfortunately, the return was something that I really had to deal with. So not so lucky. I mean, now we have the double Dshift, but we've still got to boost them down, which isn't as easy as you think. Fortunately for us, Time Worn Mage at least does its job when it comes to giving us the Crimson, which, while both lowering their health, also allows us to play other stuff. I do have to stock my hand up though, which is why I return the Mage. Even though we will overdraw, I'm not too concerned. We got double Fiery, Wind Blast, 2 Dshift, 2 Chimera. We're on turn 7, so we're probably going to have to drag this game out to turn 9, which is a pain, because I much prefer using Dshift turn 7 for those optimal Chimera plays. Luckily though, as long as we can continually deal with their board, and they haven't got a crazy Dshift either, then dragging out might not be a bad option. Another glow, pain in the ass when they're being used to basically stuff my hand back up.
You're done for.
Fortunately for me, that Fire Embrace being at 1 and Fate's Hand being at 3 isn't so bad. It means either way it's only going to cost 3 to play those. Or we can easily just drop Chimera, which I'm not sure if that was at enough at this point. Not quite, we'd have to Chimera into Chimera.
No.
Which would be a little frustrating. Lucky enough for us though, our opponent not quite killing us off yet.
It's just like back in the old days.
I mean, Crimson Sorcery is pain, but nothing we shouldn't be able to handle.
I'm just a mage who's as old as dirt.
And no Dshift, so we get a free turn to kill off whatever we want here. I do choose to Chimera everything though, suspecting that they've played out most of their big threats, meaning removing them all and dropping their health just that little bit is really good when I've got a Chimera and a Fire Embrace loaded up next turn.
Here comes some real magic. Impressive. Looks like.
And luckily that seems to have worked, so they conceded. They obviously didn't have Dshift and had no way to deal with what I had left in hand. So our next match is Blood, and you will find a lot of players will concede before you play your finisher, mainly because they realise that they're screwed.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
Most of the time when you've set up combos like that, they realise, hey, we actually can't do anything, so we're not going to do anything. My hand again, not that great. Double Dshift was good, but not the best. I would have preferred to have what I've got now, which is the Chimera and Dshift, although Magic Owl is pretty useless until turn 4, especially when going second. Luckily for me, Magic Ring makes a huge difference. I do end up sacrificing the Owl and sending it back into the deck, which is good. It means I can draw it later and hopefully use it to boost if I need it. And drawing the Glow was actually probably the best thing to get against Blood, because I'm guaranteed to be able to return things pretty early on. And returning Blood Wolves is awesome because they will inflict damage to themselves, which in turn makes my Chimera turns later on a lot easier. And of course Magic Missile being the next best card to draw, deals with Wolf and it gets us an extra card. So I would hope for an Insight or something good. Fortunately, no Insight. And we got Time Worn, which means our Evolve next turn isn't going to complete waste.
You are my code.
And with both of those, we're actually in a pretty good spot. They've dropped themselves to 12. We can clear the board, we get to keep our 4/4 up. We also drew Insight, which means we do get that extra draw.
I'm just a mage who's as
So
old
we get
as
double
dirt.
spell boost, we get to clear the board, and our Dshifts are getting closer and closer to being playable. Especially when you got double Chimera now. Spell boosting everything by, what, 5 for the major stuff and 2 and 1 for the others.
Promise you'll satisfy me.
It's a little tricky to get Dshift to work every time, but I've found that the more that I've played this deck, the more I'm realizing which cards are important to keep and which cards aren't important to keep in the early game, which makes a huge difference to the late game. Sometimes you do have to get lucky and have the perfect draws, but most of the time you can compete with what they're doing. So nothing too substantial here. We get to clear that. Sorcery drops Fates down to 1. Didn't quite want to drop it to 0 because it wouldn't make much difference. Plus, I didn't want to lose a spell boost on that double spell boosting, so why bother using it on the Fates there? Much better off using it on the Dshift, so I can Dshift turn and then hopefully Dshift the turn after that. Do need to find a way to remove both Belf and this 2/1 though, and unfortunately Wind Blast was only just drawn, meaning it doesn't have much advantage. Luckily though, Magic Missile makes the difference, especially now that we've drawn both Wind Blasts, so that's plenty to get rid of the 6/6. And our Dshifts are now crazy usable, especially with a Mystic Ring in hand. We can drop them even further while boosting Chimera. Basically we have an ideal hand now. There's not much Blood could play that would be anywhere near a threat to what I've currently got. Although I do decide to use Magic Owl, which deals 1 damage to me, but spell boosts everything by 2, so it's basically counteracting itself for the cost. I thought, why not? It also allows me to use the Fate's Hand. I probably didn't need to do it. I could have just won by, you know, D-shifting twice and playing Chimera anyway. But I thought, hell, we're going to get the biggest Chimera we possibly can here. So why not?
Here comes some real magic.
Plus, with Owl on board, it can easily win anyway. I really didn't even need Chimeras at this point, especially drawing into Merlin.
Here comes some real magic.
And I decided not to mess around anymore and just play out the Chimera for the next turn. Well, obviously throwing out our followers because I didn't really want to leave those in my hand just in case I stuffed up somewhere. So, a crazy Chimera, 23 damage. Spreading that out, you know, 19 to face.
I lost. You're tough.
Not too hard when you're fighting blood. And our final game against Forest. So this was a little of a tricky game to play against. Forest is one of those decks that can bring out just as much burst damage as Dshift can, but they usually do it a little bit earlier with Roach, so it's a little difficult. You have to have a pretty nice setup and stop a lot of their early game plays to beat out Forest with this deck. So being able to have Glow in my hand in the opener is pretty much perfect, and drawing both of those one-drop spells couldn't have asked for much better. And they even play Wood of Brambles, which is pretty good for me. I mean, being able to glow that straight back into their hand, it doesn't really do much for them, doesn't really do much for me. But it does spend my mana efficiently, which is what I like doing when I'm playing Dshift. And the more draws I can get, the more odds I have of getting a Dshift in my hand, which is exactly what happens. We end up with double Dshifts. Which is what you want. You really want one Chimera, two Dshifts, really close together so that you can play them both out. Sometimes you have to work with one Dshift and a Loki, and that sometimes is what you need. But in most cases, I prefer double Dshift. So again, boosting everything quite well. You know, turn 4 and we've already dropped, you know, our Dshifts down a fair amount. We've got the Fiery down. We've already got Giant up. We're currently sitting at a nice spell boost count for all our cards. And we're only going further. I did decide not to play Mystic Ring. I didn't really have a decent target. I would have liked to have maybe used it on the Kaleidoscope Globe, but I really wanted to keep that against Forest, knowing what they have. Unfortunately, I do get a decent amount of damage here. Dropping me to half my health. Put me at a huge risk. If they had a really good Roach turn next, I would have been absolutely screwed. So I was really hoping they didn't, because I should be able to get my Dshifts down just low enough by next turn. Especially now that I have a ring target in Mage. I didn't find the need to keep Mage in my hand. And I could have saved this Fate's Hand, but I do decide just to play it. Looking for any one-drop spell that I could play. Whether it was another ring, whether it was Insight, I didn't really care. So I just used it a little early. Otherwise, most people probably save it to next turn. Plus, getting Dshifts down to 6 is a lot better when going into turn 7, because then you can use a 2-drop spell like Glow, and then still be able to play a Dshift. While at the same time, Chimera is just getting bigger and bigger. Can't click my spell boost button. Yeah, let's click on Chimera. There we go. So Chimera's the 16, with a Glow return, and if we don't draw into a 1-drop, which we don't, then Dshift, that's double spell boost on Chimera, so Chimera is now at 18, I believe. Yep. And we've still got another turn spell boost yet. Which fortunately, this works great. Merlin is perfect for doing this.
You're done for.
I mean, I can use it to trade into a fairy, which lessens the things on board. I also get to keep the Merlin around, which means I've got 4 extra damage for my next Dshift turn. Which is the reason I didn't ram into the 3-3. And Chimera gets plenty of damage at 20. So we're only going to lose 4 to these followers. And then we get a nice 16 to face and a 4 on board for an exact 20 lethal.
Whoa, you're strong.
So basically an OTK combo if they were at 1 more health. So I know there are different variations on this deck, but this is the one that I've personally been enjoying the most so far. If you guys are enjoying a different variant, go ahead and play that, because most Dshifts do the exact same thing, just in different ways. So that will be the video. Deck list in the description below. You can hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya.